We're going to talk about the preschooler. The preschool period is from ages 3 to 5 years. There is a rapid rate of growth when it comes to personality and cognitive growth. So we see big changes when it comes to their personalities and cognitive growth during the preschool years. Their vocabulary dramatically increases. Physically, tonsils appear more enlarged. Reason being is if they haven't been going to like a daycare or preschool setting, they're now around more kids and being exposed to more germs and viruses. Certainly not the best at keeping their hands to themselves, which goes right along with spreading those germs. And the tonsils, they act as a filter. So a part of that lymphatic system acting as a filter for those germs and different microorganisms. So again, tend to see those start to enlarge in the preschool period. Pulse rate decreases to about 85 beats per minute. And also during the preschool period, we tend to see more increased coordination with their gross motor skills, fine motor. A lot of the coordination has more to do with the gross motor skills, so bicycle riding, running, and kicking. We will also see an eruption of their deciduous teeth, or those baby teeth, become complete as well. Their physical growth. Their physical growth slows and stabilizes, again, over those preschool years, compared again to our toddler, compared to our infant, that will slow. Their average weight gains remain about 4.5 pounds per year, and their average height increases by 2 to 3.5 inches per year. They tend to have more of a slimmer, taller, and more childlike proportions. They get rid of that squatty, toddler, pot-bellied appearance that we see because they are getting a little bit taller. They're slimming out, don't have that pot belly like we do in the toddler period. Their gross motor skills. Those become refined more and more throughout that preschool period. Again, I don't want you necessarily to memorize exactly what a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old can do, as long as you have kind of that general progression, knowing what they're able to do. By 3, they can run. They're starting to alternate feet on stairs, like going up and down steps. They're able to ride a tricycle, and they can stand and balance on one foot, like in this example of these pictures. At first, it's just for a few seconds. That's kind of like their new big trick, like, look what I can do, right? And that will improve. They can stand on one foot longer because their balance and coordination is improving. By 4, they're constantly in motion. They're jumping, they're skipping. By 5, they are learning to throw overhand as well. Fine motor development for a preschooler. We're seeing refinement in the eye, hand, and muscle coordination. Refinement in eye, hand, and muscle coordination. By 3 years of age, they're able to undress themselves. They can stack towers of blocks that are getting bigger and bigger. Compared to like the toddler, they're only stacking maybe just a few blocks. Now these towers are getting more and more blocks added to them. So again, refinement in that eye, hand, and muscle coordination. They're able to draw a cross on a piece of paper. By 4, they can do simple buttons, like in the pictures, they're doing buttons. We're not talking about those little itty bitty buttons or buttons like on jeans. Those are a little difficult. We're talking about a little bit bigger buttons, very simple, easy to kind of slide in and out of the buttonhole. And by 5, they can draw a 6-part figure, and they are learning to lace their shoes. Language development in the preschooler. They make big progress in their language development when it comes to the preschool years. The extent of a 3-year-old's vocabulary really depends how much they've been exposed and encouraged to ask questions and participate in conversations with adults or others. Their vocabulary, remember at the end of the infant year, we have about 4 words. By the time we're age 2, they can comprehend 300 words. You'll see a dramatic increase in their vocabulary during those preschool years. By age 5, they know 2,100 words, or they understand and comprehend 2,100 words. That's huge. The ways, again, we promote that, just simple conversations and interactions with that preschooler, storytelling, reading books, all will help develop that. Another thing to think about, too, with preschoolers, they're very egocentric and they define objects in relation to themselves. So When you say, "What's a spoon?" they say it's something they eat with. They're not going to define it by the characteristics that it's curved, it's usually shiny or metal or it could be plastic. That is not something that the cognitive development still isn't quite there. They really think of objects about how they are used in relation, that they use them in relation to what they do with them. Play during the preschool years is what we call imaginative and imitative. So we know the imitative kind of started back in the again in the toddler period, but it's really pronounced in the preschool years. So for your two blanks, doesn't matter which way you put them, imitative play and imaginative play. They really enjoy games of imitation and pretending to cook, pretending to be pirates or a doctor or a teacher, and they make up their own rules when they play. Right? By 3, they're really learning how to take turns. By 4, their pretending is really a major activity. I know with my daughter, we went on treasure hunts in our house. She would make a map, and like we'd have to cross rivers and climb mountains and watch out for crocodiles. That's part of that imaginative and a lot of that pretending that comes along in the preschool years. By 5, they are liking games that have numbers or letters. And another thing that we tend to see around play in the preschool years is the imaginary friend. Imaginary friends are very common at this age. It's nothing to be concerned about. They often exist, especially until children formally begin school. So usually that not the preschool, I'm sorry. Usually that imaginary friend will disappear once the child starts kindergarten and going more to a formal school setting. They might stick around for a little bit, but they usually disappear. They very much want them to be part of like their lives. They're not just play. They're maybe that they're insistent on that they eat dinner or have a meal with you or have a snack, and they will want the parent to set out a place for them. Go with it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's normal development. Again, that is part of that imagination that they have during this period. So that is normal preschool development. Social emotional development in the preschooler. A lot of it uh, changes, and a great deal of that is in their ability to understand their world and how they relate to others during those preschool years. So we have different types of development, and some of that goes a little bit with their play as well, and just what comes about in the preschool years. Again, and there's initiative, there's imitation, there's fantasy, which is part of the magical thinking, believing that thoughts and wishes can come true. So again, you see the tooth fairy, and that if they believe and wish on something, that it's really going to come true or could really happen. We'll also start to see gender roles. They're becoming much more aware of the differences between sexes, between boys and girls, and what those roles look like sometimes. With socialization, preschool is all about learning how to share and take turns and learning how to play well with others. So, again, you can see by 3, they're more capable of sharing, they're playing with other children, they're much more agreeable. By 4, they're playing in groups. They often can become involved in an argument. Hopefully, it's not to the point that it's becoming physical, but sometimes that can happen. So again, they still need some supervision. And by 5, they really start to develop that idea of a best friend, the best friendship. So usually somebody in like their preschool class or someone they're around a lot. Talking about promoting preschool safety, go back and look at that box 31.4 about common safety measures to prevent unintentional injuries in preschoolers. When it comes to motor vehicles, they are forward facing, they're still riding in a car seat. They need to be in the back seat of a vehicle at all times. Again, making sure they're properly strapped. One concern is that, and during the preschool period, is that they often are learning how to unbuckle themselves. So teaching that as long as a car is moving, they need to remain buckled up. We're still concerned about falls. Again, they don't always see or understand the danger that they are putting themselves in. Drowning, really need to teach about water safety, not leaving them unattended around waters, not in a bathtub, not around a pool, taking those safety measures of making sure we have gates or fences around pools or access to pools. Um, Thinking about animal bites, certainly a safety concern as well. Poisoning, again, things should still be locked up high. Poisonous materials put up and locked. Same with medications. Burns, taking safety measures to turn like pots and pans back away so they can't grab handles and accidentally pull something down on them and burn themselves. If we're heating food up in the microwave, being careful that if it gets too hot and setting it back, that again we don't leave that unattended and the child climbs up there and gets it, because during this age group, scald burns are probably one of the biggest burn uh, reasons that we see. Also important to talk about community safety, and that's really getting into learning how to, if they're riding a bike, how to safely ride their bike, how to cross a street safely, making sure they look both ways. Also talking about stranger danger, and not, being lured by someone that they don't know with, candy or a dog or a cat or something. That really we teach them they shouldn't just talk to anyone, and that they should take precautions around strangers that they don't know. Some other injury prevention things to think about. We really want to put an emphasis on protection and safety education. So again, wearing those helmets if they're going to be riding bikes or tricycles. For car seats and booster seats, they need to be in the rear seat using it's okay to start using a seat belt versus like if they're in like a car seat that has like a 5-point harness, and how to make sure those are safely installed in vehicles. During the preschool age period, one of the biggest things that we see increase is pedestrian motor vehicle accidents. So pedestrian motor vehicle accidents are increased, that's your blank, increased due to preschoolers are playing in parking lots, driveways, or out maybe like in a cul-de-sac of a street. They're learning to ride tricycles and bicycles. And one of the big things is if they're outside playing, even in their yard, they're running after the ball when it rolls into the street. And again, at this age, they're not consistently stopping and looking before they enter a street or cross a street. So really important safety things to think about to teach that preschooler. We also want to develop long-term safety behaviors. So again, preschoolers are great imitators. It's essential that parents help set that good example. So for your blank, by practicing what they preach. So if they're going to tell a child that they need to have a bike safety helmet on and they're going on a family bike ride, the parent probably should be doing that as well, because then the child is more likely to imitate the parent and want to wear that safety helmet. So again, bike helmets, this is a great time. As soon as they start getting on a tricycle or a bicycle, this is a great time to implement that safety helmet, because again, we're trying to promote long-term safety behaviors. When it comes to preschooler nutrition, we really like to promote what's called the My Plate application, and it's just a colorful plate that shows the 5 main food groups. And the idea, the purpose of using it and involving children and families is to help them to make appropriate food choices for meals. And the idea is that by making appropriate food choices and quantities, we're really trying to decrease, for your blank, decrease the incidence of overweight and obesity. Unfortunately, we're seeing that younger and younger. So for your next blank, obesity has increased over the past several decades in young children. So we're really trying to promote healthy options and healthy balance of our different food groups and appropriate portion sizes to decrease that chance of obesity. So again, we want to encourage a healthy diet, really want to encourage physical activity. It doesn't have to be structured physical activity. Just get them out there and playing, get them out there and moving. It's important to also involve kids in preparing simple parts of the meal, simple foods and snacks. Again, trying to promote healthy behaviors early on so that we have those long-term health behaviors lasting. Encourage those healthy snacks, fruit, cheese, milk, not so much the cookies and the chips and the things that we all want, but those aren't the healthiest things for us. So again, trying to promote healthy snacks and meals. All right, promoting the development of daily activities in the preschooler. Um, Usually by now, they've often mastered some of those basic skills for self care activities, including feeding and dressing, washing, especially like washing hands or maybe during the bath, but they still need some help and some supervision, especially just to make sure that they're doing it thoroughly. Toothbrushing, they're able to brush their own teeth, but again, they might need some assistance really making sure they get all of their teeth and just, again, supervision that they're doing an adequate job of brushing their teeth. So, the different categories dressing, again, they're able to dress themselves, except for maybe difficult buttons. Oftentimes, there's conflict over outfits, things don't match, different patterns. Again, for the most part, it probably bothers the parent more than it does anyone else. Who cares? Pick your battles. Everybody else is going to think they're the most adorable thing. So again, pick those battles, let it go. It's really not that big of a deal. They like those bright colors and patterns. They don't care that they don't match. So again, the picture of this little girl and all these different colors and patterns is a perfect example of that. They do prefer those bright colors and prints. So those are appealing to them. They don't really care whether something matches or not. When it comes to sleep and activities, preschoolers are often taking infrequent naps. They're not consistent whatsoever. They tend to also have more sleep problems. They can have nightmares and night terrors. Nightmares, there is a difference between nightmares and night terrors. Nightmares, it's like bad dream. They'll fully wake up from it. They're a lot easier to console and get them assured that everything's okay. Where in night terror, they're still kind of in a sleep state. They're not fully awake. They may look like they're awake, but they're really not. They're a lot harder to console and get them to calm down because they are still in that sleep state. So, definitely a big difference between the two and different in how you manage and be able to help the child cope with those can be a little bit more challenging with night terrors. Sleep ritual is still important. We want that consistent bedtime routine. So again, can encourage for your blank, encourage consistent bedtime routine. Again, they're thriving on those routines. They like to know what is expected. So again, have that bath, put on the pajamas, brush teeth, read a book, maybe snuggle for a little bit, whatever it is for that family, just do it consistently. When it comes to exercise, preschoolers are very active. They're in a very active phase of their life. Their play tends to be a little more vigorous compared to before. You start to see maybe some roughhousing. Sometimes that can help relieve some tension. There's nothing wrong with letting them roughhouse as long as it's not becoming destructive or harming a child. When it comes to hygiene, they're able to wash and dry their hands adequately, although it may not always be the most thorough. They're usually about hurrying up and just kind of scrubbing the palms of their hands and not really getting between their fingers and the backs of their hands. So again, sometimes need some constant reminding and supervision when washing to make sure that they adequately wash their hands and of course make sure that they're actually using soap. Um, Again, still need assistance with bathing just to make sure that they fully get cleaned up. And they need supervision while in the bathtub just for safety reasons. Trying to prevent those scald burns, turn that water heater down to no more than 120 degrees Fahrenheit. They can still get burns even at that temperature, but we're not going to have, hopefully, as severe of a burn or as deep of a tissue burn by helping to keep that water temperature down. Again, parents need to be regulating bath temperature as well. And again, not leaving them unattended. When it comes to care of their teeth, again, we want to encourage independent toothbrushing. Still need some assistance with that. We want them drinking fluorinated water or taking a fluoride supplement. By 3 years of age, it's now okay to have a fluorinated toothpaste to help with that as well. Again, discouraging candy and sweets for snacks because really we're just trying to prevent tooth decay and we don't want to set up bad long-term health behaviors either. When it comes to disciplining the preschooler, discipline is just as important as it was as before in the toddler period. Preschoolers have very definite opinions on things about what they want to eat, where they want to go, what they want to wear. Again, pick your battles. Some things just aren't worth it. If we are going to do discipline, again, same things that we talked about in the toddler period, we're still using in the preschool period. Timeout, very useful technique to correct behavior. Again, making sure they understand what the set rules are, given one warning, act on it the next time they do wrong by putting them in a timeout. Typically, we do their age equals the number of minutes that they need to sit still for. So again, still be available once either the temper tantrum or the discipline timeout is over to be able to comfort them. When it comes to health maintenance and promotion, the preschooler should now be doing yearly checkups. They're not having to go nearly as frequently, so just yearly. We're still doing all the same things in those yearly checkups. We're getting, updating that health history, getting a physical health, talking about growth and developmental milestones. Are they on target for their age? What to expect in the coming year with their growth and development. We do start screening at this age for hypertension. Prior to this, we don't typically do blood pressures. We don't do routine blood pressures until at least age 3, and that's just because there's no real concern in an infant or toddler unless there's some other medical issue going on. But it's harder to get more consistent readings. It's harder to get them to stay still. There's just not a real need to start screening for that until about age 3. Of course, we always talk about nutrition, talk about parent-child relationship, their social behavior, how are they with playmates, or are they participating in play and activity with their peers. We start screening for vision and hearing deficits as well, and sometimes before starting school, they may need TB testing. And again, of course, we have immunizations to keep up with. Most of the immunizations in the preschool period are really right before they start school. Most people will refer to them as the kindergarten shots. Those are all the shots that need to finish being up to date before they can go off to kindergarten the next year before they turn 6. So again, make sure you know your immunization schedule for your preschooler as well. Then of course, we're also going to talk about ancestry guidance. What does preschool care look like? What are those expected growth and developmental milestones for the next visit? How do we keep them safe? Trying to prevent unintentional injuries. And of course, address any questions or concerns the parent has as well. Common fears in the preschooler. They have a lot of fears that kind of come up in this age group. Fear of the dark. They can have fear of mutilation, especially see this more so with boys and their private parts, often worrying that it could fall off or it could get cut off. These are realistic fears to them. I know they might sound a little odd to you, but these are very real. Again, go back to the fact of their play. They're very imaginative thinkers. They're very imitative, not so much the imitative part, but the imaginative. They're also magical thinkers. So this plays right into some of those common fears. They can have a fear of separation and abandonment as well. Fear of separation or abandonment from a parent, especially if they travel maybe a lot or are gone from home. They're afraid that maybe they will not return. These are, again, real fears. A big part of that is because of that magical thinking, that imagination that they have during the preschool period. Behavior variations for the preschooler. They have lots of behavior variations. They like to tell tall tales. They're all about trying to, especially in a preschool setting, one-up each other's story, right? So when somebody seems really interested in that first story that a preschooler might tell, the next one's going to try and stretch their story to make it more interesting, to try and kind of outdo the previous one, right? Again, imaginary friends, normal part of preschool years. It's normal creative part. It's not a problem as long as the child is still having exposure to real playmates and they're not just playing with the imaginary playmate. That imaginary playmate should not be taking center stage. Preschoolers have difficulty sharing. Remember I said earlier, the preschool period is all about learning how to share and take turns. That's a learned behavior. They don't come into the preschool period knowing that right away. So that takes a while to understand. It helps them learn how to that things belong to others. It can belong to both people. And learning, again, how to take turns, how to wait in line, how to share items. Right? We can also see regression, behavior variation in the preschool period. Oftentimes, regression is really related to stress or an event in their life that is stressful, where they will actually revert back to behavior that they've previously outgrown. So maybe you've had a potty trained child for a while, and now something has happened that they kind of internalize that stress. And unknowingly to them, they will regress in their behavior and they'll go back to having a lot more accidents or wanting to be in diapers. Um, you can see sometimes thumb sucking that maybe they've given up, that negativism where they're constantly saying no. A lot of times in the preschool period, you can see this related to a new sibling coming in. So a new baby, or maybe moved and there's a new school experience, or maybe they saw something on TV that was frightening to them. Kids pick up a lot of things, so it's really important to make sure we're careful about what we're talking about or what that they have exposure to on the TV, because they're a lot more intuitive than we think, and they pick up on a lot of that. So essentially, a lot of times it's kind of like their internal way of stressing, and it's how it comes out physically is that we can see regression. And the last behavior modification we're going to talk about is sibling rivalry. It's just a natural jealousy and resentment of another child, especially a new child coming into the family. It's most pronounced when the firstborn kind of experience what we call dethronement, so that loss of the sole parental attention. We really see that sibling rivalry come in. Sex education when it comes to the preschooler. Preschoolers are becoming a lot more aware of the differences between boys and girls. They have more questions maybe about their genital organs, or they certainly have discovered them. And it's not uncommon for them to sometimes be fondling or masturbating. Again, it's not for sexual pleasure at this point. It's just more they're curious and they're exploring. And it's really important to make sure that when we are answering questions or we're teaching them something, that we're just using very simple fact-finding type explanations. Explanations should be very simple. You do not need to go into any kind of in-depth. There's all kinds of books out there for parents who maybe struggle, like how do I talk to my child about something. Again, we can see preschoolers engage in masturbation, maybe while watching TV or before they fall asleep at night. Again, it's just something to suggest to parents not to get overly concerned about. Again, it's important to teach a preschooler there's a time and a place for that. We don't do that out in public in the middle of the store. That's something we do privately at home. But again, try not to make a big deal out of it. It's something that they will grow out of. It happens. It's normal. And when it comes to teaching preschoolers about avoiding sexual maltreatment, one of the biggest things we can teach them is their bodies are their own. That it's important that they report if somebody makes them feel uncomfortable or touches them in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable, that no one should just be touching them, that is something private, and really the only people who are allowed to do that are mom or dad while they're helping them bathe or change or get cleaned up, and or the doctor, but because mom and dad have given permission for the doctor to maybe look at their private parts. We really want to teach them again, that their bodies are their own and report anyone who makes them feel uncomfortable. The last thing we're going to talk about in preschoolers is broken fluency. And that's just when a child begins to repeat words or syllables. They often sound like they're kind of stuttering. So there's an example. I want a new spoon. That's pretty common. That repetition, that prolongation of sounds and syllables and words, it's what we consider secondary stuttering. It typically develops during the preschool years. They'll outgrow it normal, and it is just part of a normal part of their development. It will pass. If it is something that lasts longer than the preschool years, then that's certainly when we can get maybe speech therapist or somebody like that involved if they're going into the school setting and still having problems with stuttering.